Okay, Commissioner Stewart, I have my devices rolling and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Anthony. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the regularly scheduled meeting of the Morro Bay Planning Commission. It is Tuesday, May 18th, 2021, 6 o'clock, and we are holding this meeting by teleconference. We have a quorum. We have a new commissioner, a second new commissioner with us this evening. I'd like you all to meet Mike Rodriguez. He is a 3-year resident of Morro Bay and has come down from, most recently, from Santa Clara, where he was at one point a planning commissioner for 8 years. So we have another experienced commissioner with us. He's got a lot of interesting background in sort of government work, local and state government work, and I'm excited to have him on board and get to know him better, and you should all check out his resume. That's pretty impressive. So we have a quorum, we are called to order, and we'll start with a moment of silence. All right, thank you. And do we have any planning commissioner announcements? Anybody? Hi, Bill. Okay, looks like no announcements.
I just wanted to say, sorry, I just wanted to welcome Commissioner Rodriguez to the board. So
thank you. Yeah. Thanks, Jen. All right, then we will now open for public comment. This is for any item that is not on the agenda, or if you would like to speak to something that is on the agenda but you can't remain for the meeting, this would be the time to call in. Anthony, do we have anybody raising their hand?
Thank you, Chair Stewart. I do not see any raised hands in the queue. Okay,
perfect. Then we will move on. Next on the agenda is presentations, and we have none that I know of. So we're going to move on to the consent calendar. All we have there is the current and advanced planning processing list. I would like to pull that because we did have some public comment on that. Let me see. And the item that we had some communication about was CDP 21-007, concern about activity at 2083 Seaview. Scott, did you have a chance to look into any of those concerns? There was some issue of blocking the public right-of-way with some landscaping. And then I think, again, a concern with building an ADU and whether there was sufficient parking. So I thought to reiterate the codes as regards to parking and ADUs, and then if there is anything to address on the landscaping in the right-of-way.
Certainly. So as it relates to accessory dwelling units, they're essentially allowed by right, and with recent changes to state law, they're not required to provide parking for them. So, I mean, that's not something we can take into consideration when we're approving those, and so that item is something that was approved or will be approved at the staff level. As far as improvements in the right-of-way, to take a look at that, they do have some 2 courses of like a stack Allen block type material out there that surrounds plantings that they've had there for a very long time. From what I can tell, they look like fairly large shrubs. You can plant things in that area that's sort of off your property, but in the unimproved right-of-way, but not in the street. The things you can't put out there typically would be solid improvements, posts, the like Allen block wall fixtures that they have. My take on that is that Public Works will require them to either get an encroachment agreement for that, or that they would have them remove those stones and just leave the landscaping, because again, you can have landscaping in those areas. And if you go up and down a lot of our streets that don't have curbs, gutters, and sidewalks, you'll see any number of things in these areas. A lot of folks pave them, like in this area, which is probably, what generated this letter to the commission. Most of the folks have just paved them over with AC paving, and so people can park there. In other streets, you see them dirt, people park there, or you see folks that have plantings and various things that are out there. So all of those things are within the realm. It's just whether you've gotten the appropriate approvals or not. We don't require, again, approvals for planting of plants in those areas. So.
Okay. All right. Well, that clarifies that. Anybody else have any item on the tracking sheet that they'd like to bring up at this point? No? Okay. Can I have a motion to approve the consent agenda? Or consent calendar, excuse me.
I'll make a motion.
Thanks, Jen. And a second? Joe, you want to second it? There you go. All right. Let's have a roll call vote then.
Commissioner Ford.
Yes.
Commissioner Ingraffia.
Yes.
Commissioner Rodriguez.
Yes.
Vice Chair Roshan.
Yes.
Chairperson Stewart.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0. Thank you.
Thank you. We're on to public hearings. We have one item, case number CUP 21-03 at 429 Tulare. And I believe we have Ms. Miramontes on this one.
Yeah, well, there she is.
Is she here?
Yes, I'm right here. I can go ahead and share my screen.
Hi.
Okay. Can everybody see?
Yes.
Okay, so this is for 429 Tulare Avenue, CUP number 21-03. It is a conditional use permit for a first and second story addition to an existing single family residence. The applicants are Pete and Beth Reagan, and the agent is Brian Ridley. The zoning of this property is R1, and it is surrounded by R1 zoning in all directions. The existing site is a one-story single-family home on a 5,000 square foot lot with an attached two-car garage. So the existing home is 1,683 square feet with a 452 square foot attached garage. The proposed remodel and addition would include 111 square feet on the first floor, and this is primarily to add in a staircase. The bulk of the addition is the 449 square foot second story addition for a study, bathroom, and deck. The proposed addition meets all of the zoning ordinance standards. The two nonconformities are from the existing residence, and that is the front setback, which is 4 foot 6 inches, where 20 feet is required. And the south interior side yard setback, which is existing at 4 feet, where 5 feet is required. So as I mentioned, the front setback is required to be 20 feet and the interior side setback is required to be 5 feet. But the existing residence is currently non-conforming with a front setback of 4 feet 6 inches and a south side setback of 4 feet. And so because the total of the proposed addition comes to 560 square feet, that is 33% of the existing residence. And the zoning code requires that an addition over 25% of an existing residence with nonconformities be brought to Planning Commission. This is the proposed site plan. The existing home and existing garage are shaded with a light blue color, and the proposed addition is highlighted in yellow. The majority of the proposed addition would be over the existing building footprint on the rear half of the property. These are some views of the proposed addition, the elevations. So on the top is the view from the street, from Tulare. And you can see that the addition is in the back half of the property and is designed to blend in with the existing home. And then on the bottom, we have the rear view where you can see the proposed new deck and second story addition there as well. These are the side elevations. On the top is the south side elevation, and on the bottom is the north side view. And these also show the addition in the rear half of the property and the existing single-family residence. The majority of the work is taking place on the north side of the property. Here is a photo simulation that shows what the proposed project would look like. So we have the existing home for comparison on the left, and then the proposed simulation on the right. The proposed project meets the following design guidelines. In relationship to existing homes and scale and mass, the addition will blend in with the existing home, and the proposed second story will not negatively impact the view from the street because it is on the back half of the lot, and there are two-story developments directly adjacent to the property. In terms of surface articulation, the proposed addition uses similar colors, materials, and design elements to those that are existing. There are no changes proposed to the building orientation and garage and driveway design, and the design is consistent with the existing residence. So staff recommendation is to adopt Planning Commission Resolution 11-21, which includes the findings and conditions of approval for CUP 21-03 for the proposed development at 429 Tulare Avenue.
Thank you, Abby. Anybody have any questions for staff? No questions? Jen.
I only have one question, and I maybe it's just more for clarification. In case Mrs. Smith or Ms. Smith is listening, she said that we got some correspondence from Marie Smith, and she was talking about, asking us not to approve this permit because it blocks her view. And I don't know if that's, with all the guidelines being met, is that even something that we would even be allowed to consider? I just need that to be clarified by Scott or someone here so that in case she is listening, we can kind of get some clarification on that.
So, so we don't protect private views. And there's a number of reasons why our policies don't do that. These subdivisions in this location and the way they were laid out and designed were not designed for everybody to have a view. They simply were not. As Abby aptly pointed out, the houses on either side of this structure are 2 stories. And I think we got a separate letter from one of the neighbors that sits across the street that also is in a 2-story house that looks across this and has a view there. My only point behind raising that issue is that clearly they know that 2-story houses can go in these locations, and we don't have any sort of policy that prohibits them. These are fairly small lots, fairly narrow, and those types of things. So if they're going to add square footage, it makes sense that they're adding it in a 2-story fashion based on how the existing house is laid out. So they're not, dramatically reconstructing the entirety of the home. So, from a pattern standpoint on the lot, it makes sense for what they're doing. About all I have to say about it, I suppose.
Okay. I just wanted some clarification. I figured as much, but since we did get correspondence on that. Thank you so much.
Yeah, not that I don't sympathize with the issue, I do, but there's not really a whole lot we can do about it.
Thanks, Jen, and thanks, Scott. Then we can now open this for public comment. Do we have anybody in the queue?
Yes, Chair Stewart, I see Wayne Johnson with his hand raised. I'm going to go ahead and unmute him. Okay, Wayne, you're unmuted.
Can you hear me?
If you have 2 devices on, you might have to turn off one of them, or else we will hear feedback.
I can barely hear you. So you can't hear me, right?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. I live on Kings Avenue, directly behind this home at 429 Tulare. And when I bought this home, I which was about 3 or 4 years ago, I was extremely excited about the view we had. So that was my intent on having a home. I've just put a lot of time into surface improvements on my home to make it comfortable, and we just thought we'd be retiring there, enjoying this view, as what my neighbor we just talked about with Marie Smith next door. The same thing for her. We thought we'd be enjoying this view forever. So it's very disappointing to hear that this is happening. And not only that, I think it's going to crush the value of our properties tremendously. And then to say that houses next door are already 2-story, I don't feel that should have anything to do with it, in the fact that maybe they were put up there without the neighbors actually realizing what was being done until it was too late, which is what happened next door to me with all the neighbors. They didn't. It just gets by a lot of people with the permit process when they put out notices. Some people ignore them, or they're not home, or on vacation, or sick, who knows what. But that may have happened in those cases. I don't think it makes it right. And I was told by the Planning Commission that the only thing we have a say-so is on building restrictions and not on vegetation, because we've been blocked by trees and stuff before, and they say we don't have any say-so about cutting down trees, which is fine. But as far as property development, we do have a say-so. So I guess I'd like to see that democratic process take effect here. I just do not think this is a good move.
Thank you for your comments, Mr. Johnson. Anthony, do we have any other public comment?
Yes, I see Brian Ridley with his hand raised. Okay.
And Brian Ridley is the representative for the project, by the way.
Okay.
All right. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, thank you.
All right, fantastic. Good evening, Chairperson Stewart and Commissioners. My name is Brian Ridley, and I'm the Principal Architect of Brackett Architecture Office, and I'm here representing the applicants, Pete and Beth Regan. So I just wanted to give you a little bit of context for how we approached the design. When we started out, we had a few guiding parameters and priorities in mind, which included, of course, the view from the property, but also the view across the property from neighboring and public vantage points, and also, as always, an efficiency of construction and compatibility with the existing home. Second-story additions are typically encouraged to be set back from the front of a house, managing that transition from a street and public way to the increased structure height. So this served as the basis for siting the addition where we did, nearer to the rear of the property. As the living spaces and main entry of the existing home are on the northwest, which is sort of midpoint and rear of the lot, it became clear that this is really the best place for the addition and for connecting the stories with stairs. If we were to choose to locate the addition, say on the southwest corner near to the front of the lot, it would place the addition above the garage, and the exterior deck would be over the bedrooms, which substantially increases the complexity of the construction and confuses the relationship to the ground floor spaces. We really did try and design this to be the smallest size feasible and functional. So it represents approximately 30% of the ground level floor area, and at 25 feet wide is only 50% of the total lot width. So that leaves the remaining half of the lot width at single story. Other upper stories in the immediate vicinity use up to 90% of the lot width by contrast. So by siting the addition to the rear and keeping a small footprint, the sight lines to the north and south of the addition are widened, as seen from the public right-of-way and properties across the street. So the views of the majority were prioritized here. Understandably, coastal views are cherished in Morro Bay. And so this project really just asks that the coastal view that many already enjoy be extended to the applicants. And in respect of the view, the project was designed to minimize those impacts to the surroundings as much as possible. And I appreciate the opportunity to answer any questions you may have, if necessary. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Mr. Ridley. Anybody else, Anthony, in the queue?
Yes, I see Sean Green with his hand raised.
Okay. Welcome, Sean.
Thank you, Planning Commission. I don't have a position on Tulare specifically, but one question I had is regarding the non-conforming front setback, which is pretty egregious. Is every non-conforming building in Morro Bay essentially grandfathered and then cannot be held accountable to come into conformance in the future? I know that if one of the waterfront leaseholders does a specific size remodel over a given percentage, there are certain requirements to then come into compliance regarding, let's say, ADA and other necessary requirements. It would seem to me that a remodel over a certain size would be at least grounds to consider bringing the front setback into compliance, given that it isn't just a few inches like the side setback is. So anyway, I just want to bring that up. Food for thought anyway. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Sean. Good to hear from you. Anybody else?
Yes, I see Wayne Johnson with his hand raised.
We just had Wayne Johnson.
Yeah.
So he's already had his public comment opportunity.
Betty Windholtz.
Okay, we can go on to Betty Windholtz.
Okay, Betty.
I just didn't know. This is Betty. I just didn't know if it would help to maybe go to more of a flat roof than a slanted roof or a less slanted roof. Just wanted to throw that out there. Thanks.
Thanks, Betty. Good comments. Anybody else?
I do not see any raised hands left in the queue.
All right. Thanks, Anthony. Then we'll close public comment and bring it back to the commission. Scott, would you like to address Sean's question about when things trigger compliance? I did notice, for example, on this house that that they are requiring the automatic fire sprinklers, which I'm assuming has partly to do with the size of the addition, because it's not required on every one, but...
Yeah, homes with additions over 300 square foot, which is one of the local amendments that we have to our building code, are required to provide fire sprinklers. Mm-hmm. As far as Sean's, Mr. Green's comments, we have a non-conforming section of our ordinance that tells us what we can do and can't do, and it allows for these types of things. I mean, it specifically accommodates if you're not tearing it down or touching it, it allows you to keep them. So that's why there's no issue there. It's because our policies acknowledge nonconformities and allow them to remain, as long as you're not, doing substantial changes to that area of the structure, which they're not. So.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. Anybody else have any comments, conversation on this project? I'm looking for people here. Another quiet night. I personally felt that the pictures are a little deceptive. So when you look at those side views, it doesn't look as dramatically taller, the addition, as when you look at that front view. And I don't know if that's just... simulating these drawings and what it may look like isn't giving a very accurate picture. But the side elevations to me look a lot less dramatic than that elevation from the street, which to me looks out of proportion to the rest of it. And I did find myself, I don't usually like to comment too much on architectural design when things are fairly consistent, but I did have the same thought as Betty Windholtz. What if the roof was flatter or reduced just a little bit from that angle? Those were my thoughts. Anybody else? Joe.
Yeah, I got a couple of things. With respect to non-conforming issues, as in the front setback, I'm always aware of what people know when they buy houses, and presumably people buy houses with notice of non-conforming. So it's conceivable, and I think it may be worth examining this in the future about perhaps changing this notion of essentially anything gets grandfathered. Maybe there are, extreme cases where, if someone is doing a sizable remodel, they would have to actually confront having to correct that non-conforming aspect, presuming that they bought the house with notice of the fact that it wasn't conforming, and they were aware that everything wasn't going to get grandfathered in. And a couple of other things too is, people don't like to realize it, but the fact that we don't have a legal right to an ownership aspect to viewship is factored into the price, presumably, of housing, and housing would, in certain areas, would be significantly more expensive if, in fact, attached to it was some sort of ownership aspect of view. And there's nothing that precludes individuals who feel that their view is being lessened from, taking on personal negotiations, discussions with the person who's doing the remodel, even if the city can't intervene. Particularly as came up with the notion of, maybe a discussion about changing the structure of the roof to sort of, make the height a little bit less. That's it. That's the only thing I was going to say.
Thanks, Joe. Anybody else? Bill, our architect, do you have any thoughts on this one?
I think it might be worth asking the architect. My guess is by making it a flat roof, it won't help anybody's view. But you could ask the architect and get his opinion. I think he's still on the line. Is that okay, Abby?
Yeah, I'm sorry. This is my second planning commission meeting, so I don't really know the order of things. But
certainly the commission can open it back up to was it Mr. Ridley to answer the question.
Okay, is Mr. Ridley still there?
I am, yes.
Excellent. So, talk to us about the roof line.
Sure thing. So, real quickly, Chairperson Stewart, I believe the sort of street side elevation, if I'm understanding what you're saying about that feeling a little bit more significant in terms of height than the side views, I think in part is because you sort of see the entirety of the roof, but flattened out. So it's not really how you perceive it in real life, so to speak. I think the rendering on the cover sheet of the package is more indicative of that. And it's ultimately why we sloped the roof this way, which was to keep it low on the street-facing side and to have it increase in height towards the rear, also to allow for some of that volume to show up inside the addition. And so there's some high windows there to sort of bring in more natural light up there as well. Certainly there are those days in Morro Bay when having some extra windows is particularly nice.
So, hey, Brian, could I interrupt?
Sure,
the question really is, if it was a flat roof, would that help the neighbors, do you think, in any way to improve their view?
I mean, it would have the function of reducing the overall height maximum. But I do believe that some of the immediate concerns about view, particularly to the house to the south, it wouldn't really impact that view. It's still going to be obstructing sort of the horizon, if you will, in the same way.
Yeah, I think that would be my question. It would obstruct the horizon because
Correct.
The second floor is probably roughly the same elevation, right, across the street.
Yeah, and across the street they're a little bit higher. To the house to the south is a little bit higher as well. But overall, we obviously we're respecting the maximum height limit, but certainly the desire was to be able to maintain that slope and benefit from some of that volume at the interior that a flat roof would not supply.
Okay, thank you for that.
Sure thing.
So we'll close public comment again. Anybody else? Jen, do you have no comments? How about Mike? I know you said you were going to sit back and listen, but go ahead and have a comment if you got one.
No, I like the fact that our architect chimed in and, answered Mr. Ridley's, or engaged with Mr. Ridley as far as the architectural component of it. So I got the answer I wanted, because I was actually going to ask Mr. Ridley when he was talking to refer back to that slope, that flat roof. So you opened it back up, so we did that. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. All right. Anybody else? Have I missed anybody?
Chair, Wayne Johnson keeps raising his hand. I know you mentioned he already spoke, but he is continuing to raise his hand. I believe he wants to speak again.
Scott, generally people are allowed one public comment time on each issue unless they are the applicant.
Normally how we do it, yes. But certainly that, whether you want to, whether you want to allow them to speak again is entirely up to the commission. So if you think it's worthwhile, certainly he doesn't like the two-story house in front of him. So
Sure. And I think we understand that. And I again, the challenge is there is nothing in our codes that protects private views. And there are just a few public view areas that are protected in the rest of the city. So I'm willing to hear him again if other folks feel that's okay.
Sure.
See some head nods there.
Sure.
All right, let's let him have another comment.
Okay, thank you. I'm trying to unmute Wayne Johnson.
So Wayne, if you're there,
Is it coming through now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Sorry, this is new technology for me. Two thoughts came to mind. One was the flat roof, of course, would definitely help, but this is it's a narrow area that we're looking through, and we would lose pretty much most of the view of the rock, which is always nice to say we got a view of the rock, and we'll lose completely the bay and half of the ocean going out from that picture. I think it'd be probably even more than what we see in that picture. But also, the thought came to mind on why it acted like there was a possibility of it being on the south side, more like over the garage. If it was to the left facing the house, that would definitely make a huge difference, because our view is right where this proposed addition is. And if it was to the left of that, then we'd still see the rock, and we'd see probably half of, maybe a little bit of the bay, and for sure the ocean. But if it was over to the left, if there's any way the architect could and the owners could do something like that, it would be greatly appreciated, that's for sure.
All right, Wayne, thanks for those comments.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're closing public comment again. I do think the architect addressed the challenges with building it over the garage. And actually, in our residential design guidelines, one of the things they suggest with additions and second stories is setting them back from the road. So I think the architect, in his other considerations in terms of cost and so on, there was a reason to push it back, but it also is part of our design guidelines to avoid that kind of massiveness that's at the street side.
They also can't put it over the garage. The garage is in the setback.
Gotcha.
I mean, the addition would have to take place 20 foot back from the front property line. That garage is only 4.5 feet from the front property line.
Okay.
So I would imagine, the architect right now is cringing at that idea. So anyway, that I think makes things probably worse.
Right. Okay. Well, I think it's one of those situations where, we can hope that it will turn out better than some of these pictures look like, the elevations that were given. Reality is always a little bit different. They also were going to have to do, where was it? They had to get some other work done or that may adjust their elevations a little bit, didn't they? There's something about the height, the topographic survey that they didn't have with the issuance of this permit, so they have to get that done. So that may
correct with their the billing application they'll have to do.
Right. Well, anybody have any other comments on this? Not seeing anybody. Anybody want to make a motion? Let's see. Bill, was that your hand up?
Yeah. I think I'd make a motion to approve the project. I think I did listen carefully and I looked carefully at what the architect did. I think it is a careful and a sensitive design as it can be. And I do think, it is the way the code reads. I don't think we're going to solve that problem. So I think I would make the motion to approve the staff recommendation on this project.
We have a second.
I'll second that.
All right.
Susan, Mike.
Thank you, Mike. All right. Let's have a roll call vote.
Vice Chair Roshan?
Yes.
Commissioner Rodriguez?
Yes.
Commissioner Ford?
Yes.
Commissioner Ingraffia?
Yes.
Chairperson Stewart?
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, moving on to new business. We have the annual water report and recommendation for allocation of water equivalency units. And I believe we should have Damaris Hanson.
We do.
There she is. Okay.
Good evening.
Hi, Damaris. How are you?
I'm doing well. It's nice to see all of you.
Good to see you.
I'm going to share my screen here. Let's see. Make this. All right. Can everyone see my screen?
Yeah, we can see it.
Yep, looks good.
Okay. So this evening we're going to be going over the annual water report and the allocation of the 21-22 fiscal year water equivalency units. A water equivalency unit, or a WEU, is a measurement of water use equal to the average amount of water used by a single-family residence over the period of 1 year. The intent of the WEU allocations are to regulate the addition of new water users to the city's water system and to ensure the demand for water does not exceed the available supply. So a little background on WEUs. In 1984, citizens adopted Measure F as a growth management system. It set a maximum population of 12,200 and a maximum number of WEU allowed to be issued at 70 per year. With 130% of those residential WEUs shall be used for commercial, so 65 for commercial. From 1977 to 2015, a WEU was equal to 10,780 cubic feet of water, which is based on 166 gallons per capita per day. In 2016, that was updated to 8,732 cubic feet of water, or 90 gallons per capita per day. This is just more representative of actual water use currently. So current water supply, for the water supply for 2020, 94% of that water came from state water. The Department of Water Resources informed the state water contractors this year that the allocation for 2022 will be 5%. But this allocation plus our drought buffer and storage in the San Luis Reservoir will make up the difference to allow the city to have the projected average demand. The Morro Valley, 6% of that water supply came from the Morro Valley. The wells in the Morro Valley have high nitrates, and this water has to be treated by our brackish water reverse osmosis plant to remove those nitrates before distribution. And the Morro Valley only has an allocation of 581 acre feet per year per our water rights. The Chorro Valley was 0% of our water supply in 2020. The Chorro Valley hasn't been a part of our water supply for numerous years. These wells have a restriction for stream flow for 1.4 CFS in order to pump from those wells. And those wells also have high nitrates and need to be treated with our brackish water reverse osmosis plant. And the city currently does not have a pipeline to take this water to that plant. And then water conservation, Morro Bay has continued to reduce water use for the last 7 years compared to the base year of 2013. 2020 water use has continued to decrease, but has recently seemed to level off. We're not decreasing as much as we were the first few years after 2013, kind of leveled. Excuse me. So drought. In April, Governor Newsom signed an emergency declaration, state of emergency in Mendocino and Sonoma counties. Since then, since your staff report actually came out, he has added 39 more counties to that list. San Luis Obispo was not part of that, part of the list. You can see in the map there, the yellow and the orange are all the counties that are on the list for the state of emergency. It is anticipated due to low snowpack and persistent dry condition that the governor may declare a state of emergency for the entire state and require stricter water conservation measures. So our current water conservation measures are for moderately restricted water supply. And this is a list of some of the different restrictions in it. So excessive gutter runoff is prohibited. When washing vehicles or boats, you have to use a handheld spring nozzle. No water used for cleaning hardscapes unless it's for public health and safety. Outdoor irrigation is prohibited between the hours of 10 a.m. and 4 p.m. And restaurants shall only serve water when requested. So if the city was to move to water conservation's requirements for severely restricted water supply, all of the previous restrictions would be there with these added ones. When washing a car, you have to use a bucket. Irrigation of private and public landscaping gets restricted even more. So even numbered addresses can water on Wednesdays and Sundays, and odd number addresses on Tuesdays and Saturdays, and still has the time restrictions out as well. Refilling swimming pools and spas is prohibited. Use of portable water for compaction and dust control purposes for construction activities is prohibited. And all visitor serving facilities in the city have to display water conservation requirements for the benefits of educating the visitors and communities. And the handouts or flyers or whatever they may be are provided to the owners and the managers free of charge. The city pays for those. So water management planning is going forward in our future water. In November 27th, 2018, City Council adopted Resolution 92-18, approving the One Water planning document, which documented one of the council's major goals. The plan determined to restrict the Truro Valley water rights, and because it's just not a reliable source for the city. Additionally, the cost associated with the seawater desalinization was recommended to discontinue this use for our water supply. The water reclamation facility was determined to be more reliable source, sustainable, cost-effective water source than other options analyzed in the One Water plan. The new water reclamation facility will provide the city with the ability to provide up to 800 acre feet of water through indirect potable reuse, or by injecting this highly purified water into the Morro Valley Basin and recovering that water with existing extraction wells. So here's a summary of the 2020-21 WEU allocations. Last fiscal year, City Council did approve and allocate 115 WEUs for development. The allocation of WEUs that were used was 84.81. That's 8 for single family homes, 21.7 for multifamily, 55.11 for commercial industrial. So I want to point out there's a big difference here from previous years. Staff really looked at this program again when we were getting ready to prepare all this year. And previously, the WEUs were always issued at building permit final. And looking at the process, it makes more sense, and it seems like it was intended more to be issued at planning permit issuance. So this year I included all of those projects plus all the buildings ones. So there's quite a bit more WEUs than there normally is. Just to give you a reference, last year I think we issued 8 WEUs. The year before that was around 6. We've issued 3 before. So this one is including a lot more projects. And not to mention, we did have some larger commercial projects, larger hotels, a few smaller ones come through. So all of those are getting included in that this time. So as a conclusion, the WEU allocation and Measure F compliance, the city has not yet reached a Measure F population of 12,200. Therefore, new housing units can be issued. Available water, even with state water allotment at 5%, the city will receive a full amount of water needed to meet projected demand. And if a state of emergency is declared, which includes San Luis Obispo County, we can move to the next tier of water conservation measures for severely restricted water supply. The citizens of Morro Bay have continued to conserve water, as seen in the reduced production amounts over the several years, and citizens are really making conservation a way of life. So staff recommendation is Planning Commission to adopt Resolution 12-21, which includes a recommendation to City Council to allocate 115 WEUs for fiscal year 21-22, 20 residential WEUs, 30 for single family, 20 for multifamily, 65 for commercial industrial. And recommend City Council to implement water conservation measures for severely restricted water supply conditions if the Governor of California declares a state of emergency, including San Luis Obispo County, due to the drought. I've included that part in red because that part wasn't part of the staff report. Like I said, that happened last week after this was all prepared. So that concludes my staff report, and I can help answer any questions.
Thank you for that very comprehensive report. Anybody have any questions? Come on, you know you've got questions, Joe.
Yeah, I'm grateful that we seem to have adequate reserve allotments for the 21-22 year. However, given droughts in California seem to last not 1 year but 3 and 4 and even longer. Any idea, 2 years hence, what we might be looking at, in terms of the reserve that we have in one reservoir or another, or is it just impossible to offer any opinion?
You mean the reserve in the San Luis Reservoir?
Yeah, is that likely to get exhausted after this 1 year or 2 years or what?
Actually, I would like if Rob Levitt, because I see he just got on the meeting there, he's joining us this evening for helping with these kind of questions. He's an expert in this area. It's a very complicated way that they do this math, this water math.
So San Luis Reservoir is basically the start of the Southern California Water Project. So water comes from Northern California through the Delta and then gets pumped into San Luis Reservoir. From there, it's pumped to Point South, San Luis Obispo and Santa Barbara County being one of those, or two of those contractors through use of the coastal branch of the State Water Project, which was developed in the 90s. San Luis Obispo Reservoir, when we talk about a spill, doesn't actually physically spill. It's some water math that is used is if the amount of rainfall and runoff exceeds the amount withdrawn, they consider that to be a paper spill. And depending on how much that is exceeded, how much you lose. So typically what happens is everybody's water in storage resets to zero. And I think the reason DWR did that is to account for evaporation and other losses, because they don't have that part of the equation. Currently, we have, that was a long way of getting to how much water we have in storage. The city of Morro Bay has an allocation of 1,313 acre feet a year of state water through the San Luis Obispo County Flood Control and Water Conservation District. We're a subcontractor to that. We use typically about 950 acre feet a year of water, of state water, and the rest is made up typically through local water supplies, through our groundwater wells in the Morro Valley, and then run through the brackish water treatment system. So that water that's the resultant from not using all of our state water allocation gets put into storage. We currently have about 1,100 acre feet, a little over 1,000 acre feet of water in storage. That will likely make up the difference between this year and next year. If we were to have a low water year again next year. After that, what would likely happen is the county would have to use some of their unallocated state water. So the county has an allocation of 25,000 acre feet a year, and they have signed contracts for about 5,000 of that. So the rest of that goes into storage, but not everybody has bought that up in drought buffer. So we can thank the countywide taxpayers for keeping that water for us state water customers. I'm not sure that all the countywide taxpayers are happy about that, but that is a benefit to the county having such a large allocation and a small customer base. So there is some drought resiliency in the San Luis Obispo County's water supply. If it were a long-term extended drought or a catastrophic interruption in the state water supply, Morro Bay would have some difficulties supplying our average demand of water. We would have to go to much more draconian, restrictive conservation measures to make it work. In addition, we would likely talk to our neighbors, the chief being the California Men's Colony, to supply us with water through their Chorro Valley allocation. They could run that through their water treatment plant and kind of backfeed the Chorro Valley pipeline to give us water. We've done that in years where the desal system was down for emergency repairs, and state water also went down in emergency. So that is why it is, in my view, important to have additional local water supplies, the water reclamation project being key among those. I think that was a long-winded answer to your question. Sorry, Joe.
Yeah, thank you.
Dan.
Susan, I wanted to ask Rob a question.
Okay. Okay, Mike, and then Jen.
Rob, I was just about to ask you this question, and then you gave the answer, kind of. Just for everybody's benefit, I worked for the California Public Utilities Commission for 12 years, which regulated all water utilities in the state. And when I was there, we always thought the state was in a water crisis full time. We never have really been out of a water crisis. So, and then I went to work for the for the Santa Clara Valley Water District. So, Rob, you'll be familiar with, Semi-Tropic, which is a water bank that we used. We were the first ones to invest in it. We had to pay $25 million just to have a water bank. program. So that's why Rob mentioned about some of the people may not understand why we invest in that, but that's a real good program because when you need the water, you have it in a bank. It's like having money in the bank. So I just wanted to give that background, but then I'll ask Rob the question. So as we enter the 3rd to 5th year of our drought, Rob, if we were to go there, then obviously our reserves would be threatened tremendously, right? And then we would have to, be in competition with everybody else who needs the water, right? Can you comment about why? I like staff's comment about conservation should be a way of life. And I think the state of California needs to wake up to that. We've done a great job. And I'm glad I live and serve in a community that respects that. And we're doing our job. I just think the state of California in general isn't doing very well. So I just wanted Rob to comment about that, the things I've said, and what he thinks about that.
I think he would find a lot of agreement in the water industry that there are many players that could do better. I think a lot of people have gotten the message that you need to install water meters, and I think most of California is becoming metered, with Sacramento being one of the chief unmetered areas, and that I think most of the city now is metered. Fresno, I remember that being not metered, but I think they are going to be metered or in the process of being metered. I guess I agree with you that, we live in a semi-arid area and we need to treat water as a precious resource.
Great. Thanks. Now, Jen, I think had a question or comment.
Mike, were you done?
Yeah.
Okay, just to make sure. I actually, Rob, since you're on here, or I can ask any of staff here, where are we on the WARP project as far as projection for when that, projection date for when that will actually be functional?
An opportune time. We just presented this at the CFAC committee about, just a little while ago. The schedule has us completion and complying with the time schedule order to have it fully treat the wastewater treatment components fully operational by spring of 2022. That'll be followed with proving out and testing of the injection water supply and the permitting phase of that. So we're in the process of completing the engineer's report for the groundwater injection system with the Division of Drinking Water, the State Board's Division of Drinking Water, which is formerly the Health Department. It used to regulate the water. Now it's in the State Water Resources Control Board. Working with them on permitting the groundwater injection and recovery portion of the plant. And then there will be some rigorous testing that will happen once we start operations of that facility. That will probably follow on in the fall of 2022 before we start full-scale operations. Once the water is injected in the ground, it will be in the ground for at least 6 months before it is recovered at the existing city's extraction wells, 4 to 6 months, meeting the California Title 22 requirements for indirect potable reuse.
That's good news. Thanks, Rob.
Thank you.
I see. And Jen, are you finished? Yeah. Okay. I see Bill with his hand up. Okay.
Damaris, Rob, from a planning perspective, give me an idea. Let's say we get a large project that comes through in 1 year, maybe an outsized project. How would the allocation work if we have, in 1 year, we have a larger project? Most years we don't make the threshold. Is there a way, have you guys come up with a way that we could spread out the allocations of the DWE?
It would likely, if it was tremendously large, we would need to phase that allocation of WEUs over time. So I believe in the preamble of the ordinance, and perhaps it was codified, that the citizens did envision the time where we might not be able to approve projects. All the projects that were requested in a year. We have never seen that occur in Morro Bay. Like Tamara said, usually it's significantly lower than the allowed allocation is what we actually distribute to projects. This year is kind of an anomaly because we're picking up projects from this year and last year that show up as building permits and planning applications. Normally, we only counted the when it was ready to go to building, but a reread of the requirements. I believe that these allocations need to be issued at time of planning application. Doing it that way also gives the developer some certainty with their projects. I would hate to have a project approved by Planning Commission and then sit waiting for a building permit for several years while I was waiting for water allocations, not knowing.
That would not be good. So
No.
the past thresholds that we haven't met, do we get to reclaim those WEUs?
No, the ordinance doesn't allow for that.
Got it. Okay.
In effect, we have, because this program was supposed to be done in the year 2000. We were supposed to have issued all the WEUs and be at our build-out population of 12,200 in the year 2000 is what they thought in 1984 when they established this ordinance.
We're slow growers.
And I don't know that it's due to this what effectively is a growth limitation cap. I think it's just, I think Scott can back this up, that we typically have about 2 to 3% growth a year, regardless.
Rob, so could you give us an example? I was thinking about the larger 80 some odd room hotel we approved last year, I think, or the year before, whenever it was. How many water equivalency units would a project like that use? Like, what would their allocation be from that?
I'm going to have to rely on Tamara. She has the table right in front of her, I bet.
For a hotel, there's two different kinds of hotel. It has a manager on-site or off-site, but it's usually about a half of a WEU, so 0.5 or 0.55
wow.
WEUs for the hotel rooms. Mm-hmm.
For each room?
For each room.
Okay. That makes sense.
So about 44, 45 WEUs for an 86 unit hotel.
So one of the things I think that we often hear from the public when especially larger projects, housing development, so on, are considered or rumored about is, oh my gosh, we don't have enough water. But I think we get this report every year. And so I think hopefully people can feel comfortable that projects aren't approved unless we have enough water. And there is a relationship between what can be approved in the city and the availability. Is that correct?
Yes, I think that is. And I think there's two types of water availability. There's routine, year after year, do we have the long-term water resources? And then there's water availability in an emergency situation. And that's unrelated to development. We could have a crisis with the Polonio Pass water treatment plant, and they could give us a half an hour notice as happened about 4 years ago on Labor Day evening, saying that we're shutting off your water in half an hour. We need to do some emergency repairs. Luckily, they got it back on in about 8 hours, but we relied on water in our local storage, our tank system, and then makeup water at our brackish water RO system using groundwater.
Okay. And also kudos to the citizens who have been conserving water. I certainly agree with the comments that all Californians should be on water conservation at all times. It's a precious resource and not something we should be squandering ever. Any other comments, questions? Let's see anybody's hands up. Okay. So, do we take any action on this, Scott, or is this just a...
No, so you should take public comments.
That's right.
And then we'll need a motion in a second to adopt a resolution that makes the recommendation on the WEUs to City Council.
Perfect.
A reminder that we want to add that language that Damaris mentioned at the end of her presentation that was in red on the screen to that resolution to reflect any new emergency water order that comes down through the governor's office.
Okay, thank you. All right, do we have any public comment, Anthony?
Thank you, Chair. I do not see any raised hands in the queue.
All right. Then I will entertain a motion. Looking for, Joe, are you ready? All right, Joe.
Yeah, let's see. I move that we adopt resolution PC 12-21 and forward a recommendation to the City Council to allocate the 50 water equivalency units for residential development and 65 WEUs for commercial development, and we implement the water conservation requirements for a severely restricted water supply condition if the governor declares a state of an emergency due drought.
I'll second that.
Thanks, Mike. Any discussion?
And that includes the language modifying the resolution for the governor declaring the new drought emergency.
Yes, yeah. All right. Let's have a roll call vote. Do we have Damaris do it, or Scott, or Rob, or... Got all the heavy hitters here.
I'm happy to do it if you want.
All right, Scott.
Yes.
Commissioner Ingraffia. Commissioner Rodriguez.
Yes.
Commissioner Ford.
Yes.
Vice Chair Roshan.
Yes.
Chairperson Stewart.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0. Thank you.
All right. Second item of new business was Planning Commission discussion in relation to formation of a subcommittee to develop a list of possible public benefit items that could be considered in relation to project approvals that require provision of public benefit items. There is no staff report, but Scott, did you want to elaborate on this?
So this was, and I'll mention that he's in the queue. This was, I think precipitated by an email to the commission from John Green. So at some point, it'd be nice if we were able to open it up and let him speak, since he brought this to the attention and the commission picked it up and, requested that I place it on the agenda. So this is an issue that often comes up. People, projects come forward, they need an exception to make the project work, whether it's to height or reduced setback or something like that. I think what we're really talking about is large projects. A couple of examples for you was a height exception for the hotel project we were just talking about on Atascadero Road, slightly taller than it is, and they had to provide some extra public benefit. And we don't have any sort of list for that, right? They can come forward and propose stuff. I mean, realistically, they sit down with the staff, and staff goes, well, here's some things that you can do in this area that make sense, and do you like any of those? Do you not? And then they kind of pick some, and then that's what we bring forward, along with the project to get that exception that they need. One of the ones that's going through the process right now that's prominent is the the battery storage project at Vistra, that's also too tall, exceeds the height limitations, and so they're going to have some good public benefit there to go along with that. What does that look like? Does that look like dedication to Lilac Kaiser Park because that's theirs? We lease it from them for $1 a year. Is that all frontage improvements, including 12-foot wide, multi-use bike path on the east side of the Embarcadero? But things like that. So I think the commission, I don't want to speak for you because you raised the issue, but like the idea of coming up with a list and certainly forming a subcommittee to do that, and then having the subcommittee report back, to the full commission on what you came up with. We could re-agendize it, have a discussion, and then you could formulate that and then send it off with a letter to council to see what they want to do with it. So I think doing something along those lines makes sense if that's what the commission's interested in. I will say that because of how the bylaws were rewritten, this has to take a minimal amount of staff time to assist. So, not something that's going to take 5 and 6 hours for staff to work on, but a couple of hours. Certainly we're able to assist in whatever the subcommittee, needs, asks for, those types of things. We can allocate a couple of hours to that, to move it forward. If it needs more than that, we have to make an official request of the city council to have them authorize the planning commission to move forward on that. So I think that's about everything I have on it.
Great. That's helpful. And I do think, what I would foresee is a kind of list where it would, if subcommittee came up with something, staff could run down and say, this is possible, this is not, this is possible. There's going to be some obvious things that, codes, our general plan better than anybody, those kinds of things. Hopefully it'll be just an easy.
Well, and the great thing is you do have the downtown and waterfront strategic plan. You have the economic development strategic plan. There are items in both of those documents that are things that you should absolutely consider for adding to the list. Those were already vetted through our community and approved by our city council. Yep. So I would start there, and I think again, Sean Green came up with some good ideas in that email. So that's another place to go look at. He's sort of seen watched the projects come through and has seen what some projects have done, and I think he added things like that into his list. So I definitely wouldn't feel shy about making use of those. He provided them to you. So
yeah, that's true.
Good ideas. So.
And would this be a committee? At most we could have 2 commissioners on it. Could we have people from the public on it, like Sean Green, if he was available and interested?
The Planning Commission can form a subcommittee of 2, and you can invite others that you think might add to that. If they're willing to, assist you, then great.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Certainly, I think that's fine.
Yeah, all right. Good to know. Any questions for staff before we open for public comment? Okay. Anthony, let's open public comment.
I have one raised hand, and it's Sean Green.
All right, Mr. Green.
What do you know? I really want to thank the Planning Commission for putting this on the agenda. And Scott, as I see these projects go through time and again, and ask for exceptions that many people in the community sometimes have a problem with, like height is obviously a big one. Applicants are put in a position where they're required to provide some kind of public benefit. All too often, we just simply accept increases in TOT, for example, or increase in property tax or increase in sales tax revenue as public benefit. Well, if you're starting your own business, that's inherent in the starting of the business anyway. When we're asking for public benefits, I personally would really like to see physical improvements, not in lieu fees for some future thing that may or may not happen, not trees being planted in some other part of town, though I understand sometimes that is required because there is not space. I do really think that having a list or menu of these desirable or much needed items will help prevent our city from falling apart and will add beauty, hopefully, in the immediate vicinity of the project being developed. So I think this very minor subcommittee, in conjunction with the larger planning process critique, I guess, that's going on. I think that a really positive environment and relationship could be created by simply proposing some things on our end rather than having them proposed to us as a city, so that we don't just end up with random bike racks in places that make no sense at all, so that we don't end up with electric vehicle chargers in a very private parking lot where people don't even know that they exist. So I know there's like bike lane and pedestrian improvements. We always need those, and I think that those should be maybe the go-to thing at first. If we have a hotel going in, do we need a crosswalk there? Do we need signage? Do we need better lighting on the bike path that approaches that hotel? And so I just think that I know that our applicants are often operating in a kind of vacuum, and they certainly need to look out for their own self-interests. And it's not always on their minds that the public needs certain things. And so hopefully we can spoon feed them some things that we actually do need, so that everyone wins really in the long run, because we want to approve projects within reason. And if they're asking us for a lot, like this battery plant is asking for so much, we have every right as a city to kind of hold them over the coals and say, we need X, Y, and Z for this to happen. And, you know, there's a middle ground that we can hopefully reach. So thank you very much for bringing this up. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Sean. And I hope we can keep you involved in the process. All right. Any other public comment on this item?
I do not see any raised hands left in the queue.
All right. Thanks, Anthony. Okay, back to the commission. Do I have any comments? Bill?
I guess I'd like to get on the table. This can be a very complicated process, especially with larger projects. The ability to come up with a list, say, for the battery storage plant, in my estimation, is unlikely. On smaller projects, especially residential projects, a list like this could be very helpful. But it seems to me we should have a process for larger projects where you really do go in and negotiate and get something that's just not useful, but of comparable value. Scott, I don't know how we would that be part of the subcommittee's effort to put a process in place as well as a list?
I mean, I suppose, certainly as the subcommittee, you could discuss those types of things, and I'd, be happy to, meet with you on occasion to kind of go over those things. You Commissioner Roshan, rightly, point out that the battery project is an animal unto itself. If it comes forward and continues through the process, will be the largest project, most expensive project ever built in Morro Bay. There's going to be a lot of components to that, and the extra public benefit may get addressed in a couple of different ways with that project. I would be shocked if they don't come forward at some point with a development agreement. I've never seen projects that are over $100 million that don't have development agreements. Because the city, you submit your applications, deemed complete, we're processing it, and city council changes, and they change the land use on the project. That project goes away.
So, Scott, are you saying would that be the threshold? In other words, if there's a development agreement, community benefit would be determined as part of that negotiation?
I would say, because they have to have that those would be things that would go along with a project of similar scope to the, to the battery project. I mean, something that large, in the $450 million range, I would imagine at some point they're going to be knocking on our door asking for that, because they're going to want to lock in land use. Yeah. They don't want to get all the way down the road and not have that, at which point then that's a negotiated thing between them and city council and whatever process the city council wants us to go through, and the public's going to get involved in that. It's going to be, lengthy and I would say somewhat complicated, not surprisingly, because it's a big project.
Well, and the thing that I've seen, maybe the most grievous thing, is on large projects like that, not getting really comparable benefit, community benefit for what the city is giving away. And that's, I mean, my experience is that is really common in most cities, that we don't really get what it's worth. So I guess that would be a bigger issue for me. I guess I'm wondering if the committee could even touch on that item.
I mean, I think you could certainly, work out a framework of what that might look like. I mean, I think minimally, one of the things that would be the most helpful is really those projects are far and few between. The more common projects are, we get a hotel that comes in. We have the 83-room hotel, right? You have a residential project that come in and has 40, 50 units in it, or we have another hotel that comes forward that has 40 or 50 units in it, and they'll need something just to try to, because we have small lots that are funky shaped, and they always need something, to make it fit the site correctly. And and having a list that's ready made, like, hey, these are things, and you can even you could attach the list to different areas in town if you wanted to. If this is at North Morro Bay on Main Street, they need this. If it's in the south side of town, we need X, Y, and Z, something else. So you could be that detailed about where you think the different public benefits would do the most good. I literally could provide you with maps to do that. That wouldn't take much. We have a GIS person that could literally just print them out, and you could literally start scribbling on the things where you know where you want them, and we could turn that into a list for you. So I think that's probably the most useful part. Getting into this larger framework and discussion about how those things might work certainly could be a secondary piece. But I would encourage to focus on the things that we could use now for a waterfront project, that actually has to provide the extra public benefit.
And just to wrap this up, I guess my concern would be I wouldn't want this to get in the way of the larger negotiation around the development agreement. In other words, that's real specific, completely different scale, scope. So this would not really impact. Does that make sense? I wouldn't want to compromise the community benefits on this by this list.
Yeah, I think, those things are much more complicated. It's not that you couldn't identify public benefits in any given area that could be used for the development agreement. You absolutely could do that because we already have documents that even call out things that we want in these areas. Coalescing them into a single document, almost like a menu for folks to look at, makes a lot of sense. And again, could be useful in any development agreement negotiation, whether that's for a residential project on the Chevron property, it's on North Main, it's 10 acres over there, or it's the Vista Power Plant project, or it's whatever we end up doing with the existing wastewater treatment site when we deep that plant and reimagine what could go there. So
I could see it being helpful for developers to knowing ahead of time what they could build into their project in terms of their funding and how long something's going to take, what they might add in, knowing what the community wants, especially for developers who are from outside of this area, could be a really helpful thing.
Susan, Susan, can I chime in? Mike?
Sure,
this is Mike. I'm just going to, again, I like to think about, as we're discussing this, what this reminds me of and where I came from. Remember, I came from Santa Clara and we built Levi Stadium. That doesn't happen very often. When you build a football stadium for the 49ers, you've got to get some public benefit from that. Or 3,500 units in one shot. Again, when you build 3,500 units, you've got to get some public benefit from that. What got me is when Scott said this will be the biggest ever. Something like that, right, Scott? So where's our public benefit? Because we're not going to get this again, right? It's a once in a lifetime shot. We've got to go for it and see what we can get. That's just my experience. So we tried as a planning commission to get as much as we could out of that project for our community as a public benefit. So what is our ability to do that at this point without even forming the subcommittee? Do we have that opportunity still?
So
it comes to the community development agreement, right?
Yeah. So I think that's we're going to do a development. I would be shocked if we didn't. Because it's there's a project that's going to take a while to get through a process, and I would think you'd want to lock in your land use and those types of things. Certainly, they're not required to do any of those things. It's just that the city could pull the rug out from underneath them. I mean, I wouldn't personally be the advocate for a project that's worth that much money and not go down that road. But maybe they have different ideas. I don't know. But it seems like that makes sense, and they do need public benefit. They can't go to the height they're proposing without it. I mean, it clearly says you're in a PD overlay. You have to offer something up, and that'll be a pretty big public discussion. Is that taking down the plant or the stacks? Is that what is that? I mean, it could be many different things. And you could probably potentially argue that, since you're getting taller and you're in an area down next to the beach, do you have visual impacts from the areas behind you? So there's things you can do on the site that eliminate some of the visual issues that are there now. I mean, there's all kinds of things that come out of that, and how you attach things that the city wants to see in relationship to that. But I think a lot of that, also big things like that, have to be vetted through the community.
And Scott, the reason I was asking that is because even with that recommendation, or this on our agenda as a recommendation to council, do we still have the opportunity, would that committee still be able to get some public benefit out of this? The biggest
I mean, we're going to have a lot of conversations about that, and while their application is in-house right now, they've not requested a development agreement. I can see that as a future step in the application process. I mean, literally right now, we're kind of working with them on their submittals and the environmental work, and we requested some additional information on the environmental studies that they've done. We're using Rincon Consultants is not only the EIR consultant for the city's general plan local coastal program, but it is the firm that'll be doing the EIR for the battery project as well. So they're doing the initial review right now. We're in the early stages really of just kind of working on the project. I would say a couple of months from now, we'll have a much clearer path forward, and we're going to start having these much bigger conversations, as we clear some of the things, the preliminary stuff out of the way right now with them. So.
Okay, and I was being a little like going up the stairs, but the reason I wanted to know that stuff is because given that what you just responded, how you just responded, I see the benefit of having such a committee, and I'd be willing to even be part of that subcommittee if we could be effective in getting some of that public benefit. If we can't, I'm not going to do it, right? So that's why I was being kind of setting you up a little bit. Because if I can see the opportunity to get it, I'm going to go for it. I'm going to be part of that process and get whatever we can for our public benefit. Part of what we're doing as a city.
I do think, Mike and Bill, just a little bit of history, at least as far as I could see. And again, the Vista thing is a huge project, but there are a lot of smaller projects, commercial and residential, that come along that have these conditions on them where you are looking at something saying, well, we'd like to approve this, but we need some benefit. And they're often at a planning commission meeting where commissioners are sort of looking at each other saying, well, gee, should we ask them to plant another tree? Should we put up a bike rack? Should we, make a path here? So I think the part of the idea of this was, rather than just pulling stuff out of our hats that might be some personal, gee, I love to ride a bike, so I want a bike path. What is something that the entire, or a good portion of the community might see as a benefit for the majority of folks here, so that we're not sort of stuck in a meeting and a developer isn't stuck having something thrown at them at the last minute, where they have to sort of scramble and say, gee, I really can't plant 10 more trees here because that's on high school property or whatever, the issue. So I think part of it is a more generalized look at this. And then as we hit specific projects, and certainly something like the Vista project, I think there will be a tremendous amount of public input and vetting at all levels. So does that help a little bit with sort of clarifying what this committee might be doing?
I guess, Susan, my bigger concern would just be that both processes are in place. so that, and the one thing that Scott's saying that's a little concerning is they're not using a development agreement right now. So the question would be, how do you negotiate those community benefits without it? But Scott feels that it's, how would you say, Scott, it's almost certain that they're going to have to get a development agreement to pull the project through?
Yeah, I would be, I have not, straightforward, I said it earlier, I've not seen projects of this value that didn't have a development agreement attached to them. It's just because while everybody thinks you can get through the process and it can be this fast, they always take longer than you think. Issues come up, they need to, really, start or continue to engage with our community, and that's going to create, trials and tribulations as well. And there is, we know they have to provide us public benefit. We know this. And so they should be wanting, I would think, they should be coming to us and we want the development agreement to lock in land use, and we're going to give you this and we're going to get this. And they know it's all locked in. That's done through an ordinance. It's part of the environmental review process. And everybody publicly knows what's happening. And they're very structured, they're very straightforward, and they're very specific. Much more specific than like conditioning on a project even. You still get the conditions for a project, but they're very detailed, they're very long typically, and I'd be surprised if they don't come to us at some point and ask for it. Their lead team right now is transitioned. We've lost 2 of the key primary contacts there. They've left the company, and we have a new one that I just found out about yesterday. So they're a little in transition right now.
So I think, Susan, my distinction would be that the list sounds very helpful on smaller projects, but once you go above a certain threshold, I think my experience has been more specific negotiations are needed to get the appropriate and best value for the community.
Okay. Let's see, Joe or Jen, have you got Joe? I see your hand up there.
Yeah, I buy completely what's been voiced by Bill and Mike so far. I just think it's really important that the benefits have to be commensurate with the project. And we have to make absolutely sure that the developers of large projects, and I'm thinking of the battery project or maybe what the school district for San Luis Obispo does with the elementary school, that they're not misled into thinking that a list of benefits for someone who's building, a 4-unit apartment building is somehow appropriate, or it's some multiplier of that. We're thinking of something of an entirely different order. And then the question I have is, and would some kind of formal discussion about the appropriate benefit, is that something that would come to the Planning Commission, or is that exclusively the City Council? I mean, how is that proposed benefit analyzed? Is my question.
I'll ask a question here, Commissioner Groff. Yeah, I'm not sure what you're referring to. Like just the list that the subcommittee would be coming up with, or
no? I'm actually just focused. I'm primarily focused on the large projects. I think the smaller projects, they sort of take care of themselves in terms of what the appropriate benefit is. But I'm something like the battery project or the elementary school, where perhaps it's the minimum amount of open space and it developed as a park, or I don't even know what.
When you have, I think it often makes sense when you have projects like, that to, do our, concept review, meetings. And sometimes you can have more than one of those that helps you daylight some of those things. Like I'm thinking specifically in the realm of the school district and what they're doing. Right now, the battery project is huge, but it's pretty straightforward as to what they're doing there. So I don't know that it makes so much sense for them to do that. And, we have some things that are happening right now that the city's going through and resolving. And when we're done with that, I would imagine council will have some direction about where we're going to go next and what they want to do next. They just haven't gotten to that point yet. Mm-hmm. There's more to come on that, which is why I say, clarity on some of this will probably happen in a month or two. And And I even found out in talking with Brad Watson, their representative, that they're looking to come here, maybe possibly as early as next week, with the new representative and himself, touch base, talk with some of our community groups, maybe chamber and things like that. So might have a better idea about what they're thinking then too. I don't know.
Well, I could certainly imagine the advocate for the battery project might like to emphasize the significant increase in city tax revenues and the employment opportunities for construction and continued employment opportunities for the operation. And not to mention sort of putting Morro Bay on the map in terms of these new kinds of facilities, but that's really not the kind of extraordinary and additional benefit that we should be interested in getting. Those are the things that are sort of identified with the project itself, and if we're talking about benefit, it has to be something significant and well beyond that. So
it's a fair point, and one that one of our former chairs of the Planning Commission used to tout regularly, Bob Teft. He said, yes, your project has public benefits to it, but when you ask for exceptions, you have to have extra public benefit, not the regular public benefit that comes along with it, because that's already coming with the project. So I think that's kind of where you were, I think, not wanting to speak for you, Joe, but where you're kind of going with that. And I've always agreed with that sentiment, especially as it relates to our current codes. So. Yeah,
and I don't want to belabor this, but even if you're in a sense not asking for something exceptional, when it's a large project, like a planned development, if you will, where you're part of that is a kind of an intrinsic flexibility in what we're going to be allowed to build. That's where we should be talking about sizable benefits, even if there's no suggestion that something's going to be built above the height maximum, or even the density. Just the scope of something should, in the mere fact that it's using up a very rare commodity, which is open space, that a significant additional benefit should come into play. That's all.
Thanks, Joe. Jen.
I agree with all that's been said. I have a question about how do we determine the threshold? Is that staff? Would that be us? Is that the committee? How do we even know what this list who it would apply to, and then who it doesn't apply to? Is my question. So
that might have been probably really the first thing we should have answered, right? Is what do these apply to? And so, Commissioner Ford, we have requirements in our code, specifically in our plan development overlays, and it says the nice thing about the plan development overlays, the PD zones, is it says, hey, you're in these areas, and we'd like to allow you to apply flexibilities to your project. But if you're asking for exceptions to our code to get that flexibility, you have to provide extra public benefit. So where it applies to all of these areas where we have PD overlays currently. We have a similar policy, and you'll see that in about a month or so when we bring the draft zoning code back to you, that does it in a different way in the new code, but it's same kind of concept. And so you can see around town where those PD overlays, then you can look at the zoning map and it'll say, R4 PD or visitor serving commercial PD. And it's in those areas, and that policy specifically says, you're supposed to provide extra public benefit, and then there's some discussion in there about what that looks like. But not a lot of specificity, and there's certainly no list. So I think I like the idea, and the subcommittee should discuss that, is, kind of picking the extra public benefits that we want in a certain areas, like what are we lacking there, and then what do some of our other documents, suggest that we want in those areas, and that can be part of those lists that we suggest to folks. So I think minimally you come up with that, and then you'd be ready to come back to the commission to talk to them about that. And then if you were going to go, there was going to be a step 2 that you wanted to do, then you could do something along those lines. You literally could meet come up with some of these things and check back in with the commission, to get overall feel, every other meeting if you wanted to. I mean, it just depends on like how much work you're doing in the interim. All you have to let me know is in time to get it on the agenda, and I can place it on there, and then you can have the discussion, amongst the entirety of the commission. So it's not two of you working in a vacuum, I guess is what I would say. It's, you're doing the work, but then you get to come back and get feedback on what you've done. So a little more, I guess, with everybody working together, I guess. One option.
Thank you.
All right. Any other discussion on this? And does the commission feel that they would like to get a subcommittee together to address this? I would personally like to see that. Jen, I see you nodding. Joe and Mike, Bill. Yeah. Okay, so everybody.
I just wanted to clarify something, Susan, real quick, that it sounds like the council would bless this or not bless it.
So yes, the council would have whatever comes out of the subcommittee, and really it'll be a recommendation. It'll come out of the subcommittee. It'll come to the full commission. You're all going, three of you at least, are going to agree on what this is, and then we'll forward it to council to use. Because it's not something that's part of our current goals now, and so it's not something we're authorized to go do. But we are going to be having those conversations coming up here in the next couple of months. So this actually might dovetail with that. This will be one of the things we're working on. But anyway, that's all. You just got to officially submit it to them. They give us the A-OK, and then off we go, and we're able to use it as projects come in.
Yeah.
Okay. So what we need now is a couple of volunteers, and I want to throw it out to Joe and Jen. Let's see, Joe, you're on a subcommittee now, aren't you?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. And Jen, I don't think we've gotten you on anything yet. Are you interested in this?
Well, I'm on a lot of committees, but
okay, I understand. No, and it's okay. I just wanted to make sure you got your opportunity if you're interested.
You know what? If you do not have two, I will volunteer. But if there are two that would like to do it other than myself, I will, happily hand that over to them. But I'm not against being on it.
Perfect. Okay. Anybody else excited about this? Let's see, Mike, I know you said something earlier you would be interested.
Yeah, I just want to, it's interesting. Bill tried to call me before the meeting just to, introduce himself and chit chat a little bit, because we both have done this I did it 8 years, and I don't know how many years he did it, but I think I see some real value in this. But I was just wanted to get Bill's impression about what he thought about this, because I'd be willing to do it as long as I felt like I was going to get something out of it, for my city. I really don't want to, because I'm busy already, but this is worth it. Okay. But I want to get Bill's impression about that, if he'd be willing to also participate.
And I'm putting this out for the whole commission. Thanks for asking, Mike. I get the feeling that this is going to be sort of neighborhood specific in the list. And so my sense is that, Jen or Joe or Susan would be better to start to look at that sort of thing. The thing that I'm more concerned about is, as we get into larger projects, is how to ensure substantial negotiation. And that's where I've seen consistent failure from the cities, is that we don't end up with a really strong negotiating position around larger projects that gets value of worth that the community can actually see and experience. So what I would love is to see somehow the committee define where these apply, to Jen's point, where they don't, and then have more certainty around a process for larger projects. And the development development agreement is a great way to do it, but let's say a project comes in without one. I actually agree with Bob Teft. There still needs to be value there above the normal value. And so my interest would be that. How, with a larger project, do we find a way to ensure that there is negotiations and those negotiations are substantial?
Okay, Bill. Well, thanks, Bill, because that's exactly what I wanted, because I did that as a commissioner for our planned developments for the 49er Stadium, for the 3,500 unit development, right, where you told those. But I'm not familiar with Morro Bay as much, like you said, the neighborhood parts. So I would want to team up with somebody who is familiar with Morro Bay that way. So, but I'm definitely interested in the process because we did that. I did that. So I think that's a good, like a second part of what we do, right? And then that's something I would definitely be interested in, how to get those benefits out of those big projects. So if somebody would be willing to work with me on the other part of it, I'd be a go. I'd be a go for that.
All right. How about you, Joe? Are you interested in a second committee?
Sure, I'm available. I mean,
I feel like you're kind of familiar with the processes that have happened in the past and parts of the community.
And Susan, this was Joe's idea.
Oh my God, was it? Sure, I am available, and I'm certainly willing to help out any way I can. So yeah, you can put my name down. Sure.
Okay. So are we looking at? Should we look at Joe and Mike, or Mike, do you want to sort of reserve for something that might come along in terms of larger projects?
No, I'm fine with this because that's why I wanted.
Might be a good way for you to kind of get the feel.
Well, that's why I wanted to get Bill's impression as to if we could get the big stuff, the big benefits out of what we're doing here with this committee. I think Bill said yes, right, Bill?
Yeah.
Yes, but I think we need to make it you have to be specific about how that would happen. So I think it's great that you're involved because, in a lot of planning commissions, this is the meat of what we do.
Yeah.
This exact thing about how to get to. Yeah.
So
all right. So we've got a committee. We've got Joe and Mike on it, and I think we're good to go, right, Scott?
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, that's good. All I would say to both Joe and Mike is I'm happy if you want to schedule an initial meeting to get you guys off and running and to see if there's anything. Maybe you guys want to talk first, and then we can schedule a meeting together after that, so I could apply resources if you need things from me.
Fair enough.
I mean, that's not maybe the good idea. It might be a good idea for you two to talk first and then reach out to me and we could have like a meeting between the three of us so I could see what, type of things you might need and then we can go from there.
Sounds good to me.
All right.
All right, then I'll be on hold waiting to hear back from both of you before we go to that next step. So
excellent. Thanks everybody for your thoughts on this. All right, next up, unfinished business. We have item D1, an update from the Planning Commission Development Review Subcommittee. This was about looking at improving the city's development review process. So, Scott, did you have the report on this?
So I think in the future, I'll probably be having the subcommittee members report back to you. We haven't done a whole lot on the subcommittee side. I think last time we met, we mentioned that we'd met once. I kind of given them back a summary of the things that we'd gone over in our meeting. And our next, sort of step in the process is to identify members that we could add to a kind of like an ad hoc or stakeholder group from folks that submit applications to the city, like developers, architects, those types of things, and then we can have a future meeting, maybe 3-4 meetings with that group, and then report back to the Planning Commission what we kind of come up with. Outside of that, I'm working on a couple of different lanes right now, doing that with the subcommittee, and then we're doing some internal things to improve our processes. And so on that side of things, the latest and greatest is we've been looking at network infrastructure needs to go to electronic plan checking. We have our portal open right now to accept electronic plans, and we've identified some things that need to be improved there. Kind of like the screens don't necessarily walk you through each step in the process. Some of them are intuitive, but I mean, some people get stuck, and so identify that as something we need to resolve. We found somebody that can help us with that, and so we're waiting on a proposal for that. I sat down with our finance director, who's in charge of IT, and our IT manager, who's named Steve Dorr, and presented to them. I said, if we go to this electronic plan check concept, basically go paperless. No big rolls of plans get submitted anymore. You just drop your PDFs or whatever the format is into the electronic portal on CityWorks, and then we can review them that way on our computer screens. Those plans are huge files. I mean, they're gigantic. And so one of the concerns I had was why I wanted to meet with IT and the finance director was, is our system right now adequate, our server system adequate to do that? And I knew the answer already. It wasn't. I just said, if we go down that road, what are we going to spend to get new servers with terabytes of memory, so we can put these plans on them, versus one of the options we have is to take CityWorks, which is our project tracking software, off of our network, off of our servers, and to put them on Amazon Web Services. And so we were looking at that and what the costing of that was, and compared to the cost of, buying new servers, which are very expensive, by the way. And it looks like we're going to pursue going the route of Amazon Web Services. So I'm waiting to get a little bit of financial information back from our finance department. They're a little tied up right now with budget, but they'll be getting us some additional information to see, what that looks like and whether we would have to raise fees or anything to accommodate that. And then because we share CityWorks, it does permitting, which is planning and building permits, and it does, as part of that, it also does business licenses. And then it also does asset management and work orders for our public works department. So there's a share in moving this out of our servers that they have to pay for as well. And so we're working that out right now. We're going to have a meeting probably this week to address some issues in the business license side of things on Thursday, I think. And then next week, we'll probably have the go, no go, and I'll start working on contracts to fix the portal, to get to have it fixed so you can so it walks you through the process on each screen. So you have the ability, if you know how to do it, great, you don't have to look at that, but you have the ability to click on something and say, hey, this is the process for the screen. It really needs to have something like that so it's user friendly, as opposed to just kind of wing it. So we're going to get that, and then I'm going to start working on the contracts to go with one of our the proposers on the electronic plan check, and working with CityWorks to move our platform off the city servers which has to happen first actually, onto Amazon Web Services. So it's going to be a lot of work, but I think it's going to dramatically improve the ease of use of our system once folks get used to using it. Being able to submit everything electronically, you don't have to drop stuff off. We don't have to process paperwork, which if you walked into our office, even though it's closed right now, and you walk straight in, you run right into our permit tech's desk. And it's surrounded by plans and stacks of applications. These are getting ready to be issued. We have plans laid out on the counters on here because all the departments have to sign them by hand as opposed to electronically. So it sometimes takes days to get them signed because people are, working from home and only come in twice a week and those types of things. So it'll streamline all of that, and you'll have it at, click of your mouse, basically. So we're doing all those things, and I will probably be getting out back to the committee, a list of the folks for the subcommittee, potentially by week's end. I was planning on working on it Friday, actually, so should have something by then. So I don't know if the subcommittee has anything to add. I know I kind of sucked the air out of the room right then. Sorry.
Thanks, Scott. Well, I'm not on the subcommittee, but I'm just really impressed with what your office has been doing on top of everything else they've been doing. So good work, keeping an open mind and trying new things and stretching, to what makes sense. trying to keep up with the technology is kind of amazing. There's a lot to it, and I really appreciate what your staff is doing.
Thank you.
Bill, did you have a comment? Or
no, thank you. I am on the subcommittee, Joe and I, Joe, I think it sounds good. Scott, thanks for the update.
Yeah, sure.
And we're looking forward to the list.
Yeah, absolutely.
It does. It sounds really impressive. And, I wanted to add, because you sent me a whole series of polls that I guess that were taken by the Chamber of Commerce.
Yes.
Frankly, some of the poll, positioned Morro Bay as something less than extremely friendly to development. These are the poll conclusions. And I just wanted to say, those polls are just opinions, and there's no presentation of facts or reasoning behind the opinions expressed. God knows we've, been through the last 4 or 5 years where polls, aren't based on reason. So I want to see if we can't sort of drill down into that a little bit more. I mean, in some ways, what's ultimately, presented as improvements, I'm rambling here, but I'd hate to see us sort of decide to do things based on opinions expressed by developers and businessmen, etc., without really, mining why it is they have those opinions and just how legitimate those opinions might be. Because I think the Community Development Office does an excellent job with the resources they have.
Susan, can I add on to what Joe just said?
Sure.
Because one of the reasons I think we're excited about having this on the agenda is so we can hear what Scott's doing and we can let the public know. And to Joe's point, everybody complains. But I think if they start to know really the strength of what Scott's been doing, I mean, he's been doing good stuff, and the stuff we're talking about in the committee is really good, but we have to make sure that the community gets to hear it too. And, I think that's one of the things that the subcommittee wants to do.
Yeah, that is one of the things that we discussed is doing a better, job telling our story. And like I've admitted to the subcommittee, that's not something we've been very good at, and is definitely something that we could do a better job of. And I think this is the beginning steps of that. And it's kind of new for me. So I mean, to me, it's exciting. I like doing different things, and re-envisioning how we can do things. You have to do this regardless of where you work every 5 to 7 years. You have to really kind of look at what you're doing, and are you doing what makes sense, or are there easier and better ways to do it? And so we're doing that now. I think it's great. I like the timing of it, and some of the technology that's come out of COVID to allow us to work remotely and electronically and everything else is fantastic. Taking advantage of that, I think, is just smart. So
thanks, Scott. And I see Mike's got his hand up.
Yeah. I just wanted you to know, Susan, I just figured this out, how to raise my hand. I'm sorry that I went this whole meeting. I've never done this kind of meeting, a planning commission meeting like this, ever. I thought I did the social, thing and
it's a learning curve.
The boards, but not like this. Yeah, so I just didn't want you to think I was, because I've been playing with this thing and I saw there, trying to figure out how to raise my hand. And I finally figured it out. But back to Scott, I just wanted to, thank you. Well, you said I dialed in, so that was a good job, right? I got into the meeting.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to comment on Scott. My attitude is anybody that works 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and is available anytime is doing something right. So, and I've heard that over and over again about Scott, even though I just recently met him. But obviously, his work speaks for itself, so I think he's doing a fantastic job, too. I just want to chime in with what everybody else said.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks. Joe, you had something?
I have just a really specific question for Scott. I was looking over the projected projects, on that city budget, and they talked about the Serve City stairway as a possibility of rebuilding sometime in the future. And I look at the price for that, and I'm assuming that's because you have to build an elevator for disabled people. Is that correct?
It's not an elevator. It's just the cost of building the ramp next to the stair. It's concrete. It'd be a concrete ramp that comes down the side of the hill, and it's just expensive because it's a hill.
And so my question was, so there is nothing that exists in California law where we could somehow find an exception so that in this one particular case, we didn't have to make that particular stairway disabled accessible?
We did. We went through our certified access specialists and asked them about it, and they couldn't come up with it. We couldn't internally come up with anything. We were, stuck. We just figured we had to. And I said, well, let me go ask if there's anything that they thought about. They couldn't come up with anything. We have a firm that developed our access plan for the city. It's like this big and tells all the accessibility improvements we need to make, and we asked them about it, and they didn't really have any good ideas either. So that's why it is as expensive as it is, and that's tough. You go from a stair that might cost us a couple of $100,000 to rebuild if we wanted to do it really strong, make it really sturdy, but you just can't do that. It's got to have the other component to it. So it's unfortunate because that is a cost prohibitive number to do that. And hopefully at some point there's, we can identify some grant funding to make it more feasible. I wanted to come up with a plan for that so that we'd be ready to apply for grants to improve, pedestrian access in the city between the waterfront and, upper areas in town. So that might be something we can look at in the future too.
I see.
All right. Okay. Well, thank you, everybody. Yes, Jen.
I had a comment. Sorry. I raised my hand like Mike did, but
I'm used to the hand raising, here's a brilliant.
I know. Okay. Well, I'll use whatever is best for you.
Yeah.
I did have a question for the committee or Scott, whoever wants to answer this, but you mentioned that you are reaching out to community or you're reaching out to members such as developers, whatnot, to be a part of this committee. What is that process? Are you just kind of cherry picking, or you putting it out there like, hey?
We're going to be strategic about it. I want folks that actually interact with us, but not just us, right? I want some of folks that do work here and do work elsewhere, so they can say, oh, well, in San Luis, my experience is X. In Pismo Beach, it's Y. And then I'm going to have another person, probably a building official type person from one of the other jurisdictions. I have a couple friends that could help me out there and would be willing to, maybe sit on the sort of ad hoc stakeholder group for a few meetings that could speak to how they do things and what they see. And I know a couple of the other jurisdictions, some of those folks were also looking at this pre-COVID. Now I don't know if they picked it back up or not. I haven't had conversations with them recently, but I'm hoping that some of them have made a little bit of progress there, so they have some real on the ground ideas that have come from their jurisdictions to just give food for thought for the stakeholder group. So that's kind of the idea. That's what we have kind of a list of groups of folks that we've come up with, this subcommittee and myself, and we just haven't put names with it yet.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's great. It sounds very inclusive and sounds wonderful. Thank you guys so much for doing this. And Scott, great work. And I appreciate the transparency and being open to public. And if only people who had complaints tuned into boards like this, unfortunately that doesn't usually happen. So, but I really do appreciate it. And I also, one other thing too, is what's mentioned earlier, is that a lot of times it's the people that have had a negative experience that fill out the polls that go to do that because they want to make their voices heard. It's not always necessarily those who had a great experience. So either way, I appreciate the willingness of our city, our planning department, to do your best to improve where you can. So thank you so much for doing this.
Sure.
Thanks, Jen. Those are great comments. All right, I think we can move on to Planning Commissioner comments and future agenda items. Anything to add from commissioners? All right, so let's move on to Community Development Director comments. Scott.
I don't have anything else. Other than just talk about where we're at with the subcommittee. That's about all I had.
Great. All right. Well, good meeting, everybody, and welcome on board, Mike. And gosh, now, Bill, you don't get to be the new guy anymore.
That's okay with me.
Yeah. All right.
Mike.
All right. Well, we're going to adjourn this meeting until our next regularly scheduled meeting, which is June 1st at 6 o'clock, again via teleconference. Everybody have a great night, and thanks.